Is back into it in Chester. Here's El Senior. Yes! Yes!
The center back, Jacob Glesnes,
He's going for it.
Yes! Oh my goal! What a goal!
And that will do it! One of the best comebacks in recent years. 3 unanswered by the Union. And they go into the Gold Cup break, winning it 3-2.
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and your Philadelphia Union are finally, officially, number 1 in all of MLS. With LAFC losing over the weekend, and we all know that outstanding 1-0 victory over Columbus. The Union are now in first place in the Supporters' Shield, continue to be first place in the Eastern Conference. 5 straight wins. Unfortunately, we couldn't get 5 straight games of a Daniel Gaza goal, even though he had a couple of chances to extend it to 5 straight games. But, man, I am buzzing. I'm so excited. I'm sure you guys are too. And, hopefully the people in Philadelphia are talking about this. I know a lot of you guys listening to the podcast obviously live in the Philadelphia area, and so you guys obviously are talking about this. But I'm talking about, like, the casual, the 4-for-4ers. I hope those guys are taking notice of the Philadelphia Union. I thought it was interesting, too. Last week, or maybe it was the beginning of this week, recording this podcast in the middle of the week because, I thought I could potentially get a guest on for Toronto, but I was like, instead of potentially setting myself up for a disappointment where, it was kind of last minute trying to get somebody on, I was like, let's wait till midweek, talk about the Columbus game, and then later on in the episode, I'll go ahead and talk about, what I expect to happen in this Toronto game. So I'll play some clips from Jim Curtin's press conference, and we'll break down what I expect to happen this Saturday in Toronto against Toronto FC a little bit later in the podcast. But MLS Communications, they put out a stat talking about the run that the Union are on, and you guys have heard me talking about it. I think it's 13 wins now, only 2 losses since and the Philadelphia Union got knocked out in September by Club America. And I'm so excited that I finally saw, okay, look, maybe some more people in MLS are finally going to talk about this run, because this is a terrific run that the Union are on. Super duper impressive. And I felt like I was the only one really talking about it on social media and just in general. Maybe some of the other Union podcasts were talking about this run. I don't know. But it's something that, I think a lot of people need to talk about. And like I was saying, hopefully the 4-for-4ers are now becoming 5-for-5ers, and that they see that the Philadelphia Union are by far the best team in Philadelphia. And we got a lot of news to talk about. We're talking about the Columbus game. We're talking about my keys to the game in that game. And we're talking about my 3-star players. We're talking about Blunder of the Week. And yeah, just a lot to get to. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about the Columbus game, because there's a lot I want to talk about with the Toronto game coming up. And there's a lot of news. So without further ado, let's just get straight into the news. So starting off, Josef Martinez, I'm sure a lot of you guys have already seen this. Last week, it was reported that he will miss approximately 6 to 8 weeks after undergoing arthroscopic surgery last Wednesday to clean out debris in his right knee. And so I guess for Union fans that, don't pay too much attention to the schedule, well, Josef Martinez will definitely be back by the time that the Union take on Atlanta United. I believe the first game is in August, maybe at home. Look, I don't even know the schedule. I know we play Atlanta United down in Atlanta in September for sure, but I'm not quite sure when we play Atlanta at home. I believe it's in August, but regardless, Josef Martinez will be back 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, you're looking at a month and a half, 2 months at most. And I guess the concerning thing for Atlanta United fans and for just the club itself was, okay, is there any ligament damage in that right knee? Because Josef Martinez was complaining about the pain in that knee. The doctor that did the surgery for his ACL last season took a look at it, said, no, all the ligaments are intact. You're good to go. We're just going to go ahead and clean out some stuff in your knee. And in 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully you'll be back to what you were prior to tearing your ACL. I mean, coming back from an ACL injury is a tough ask for any player. And, the surgery has come a long way since when it first got introduced, where if a player tore their ACL, their career was pretty much over. Just look at what Zlatan Ibrahimovic is doing over in Italy with AC Milan. I mean, there's other players too that I can mention. And for Josef Martinez, I mean, he's a quality player. And I, even though I'm a Union fan, you don't want to see some of the best players in the league not be at 100%, because I think that helps the league just be competitive. And, when Atlanta United are up at the top, I think that helps just the ratings for MLS. I think that helps the competitiveness as a whole for the league. So, yeah, you hope Josef Martinez can make a full recovery from that little bit of a cleanup in his knee, and hopefully he can get back to what he does best, and that's scoring goals. But then you look, Ozzie Alonso, the longtime Seattle Sounders midfielder, spent the last couple seasons with Minnesota, and then he joined Atlanta United for the first time this season. A couple weeks ago, it was confirmed that he tore his ACL. And again, you guys might know about this already. There's so much news, and even there's going to be news that by the time this episode's out, will already be out, and you guys will probably already see it. I just don't want to spend too much time talking about the news, and I pick and choose what I want to talk about. But yeah, Ozzie Alonso tore his ACL, is going to miss the rest of the season. And you look, Heinemann last year tore his ACL. That's 3 ACL injuries, in the last 2 years for Atlanta United. And I know Ozzie Alonso tore his ACL because of a challenge. It's not like, his ACL just gave out on turf. It happened down in D.C. where they play on grass. But still, I mean, 3 players tear their ACL. I don't want to blame the medical doctors for, what's going on. I don't want to blame the trainers, because I don't think they're at fault. But I think you can question, what's going on exactly in training, what's going on in recovery. Can some of these injuries possibly be prevented? I mean, you go ahead and look, and it's not even just ACL injuries. You go ahead and see that there's a couple players that are out with hamstring injuries. Luis Araujo, Mateus Rossetto, both of those guys are out with hamstring injuries. So what exactly is going on in recovery for Atlanta United, where players are just having muscle injuries in their legs? And, I think that's fair questions to ask, exactly what's going on with the medical team down there. I'm not blaming them at all, but yeah, I mean, I think you can definitely question what exactly is going on down there. Speaking of hamstring injuries, Orlando City's Antonio Carlos, their center back, one of the center backs, I should say, is expected to miss 12 to 16 weeks for recovery with a high hamstring injury. It does not require surgery, according to Orlando City, but, hamstring injuries, they're hard to come back from, because everybody knows, the power that your legs generate. You need to move fast, and, those injuries can linger for such a long time. And maybe it's very possible that during this recovery, Orlando City say, you've already missed a good chunk of the season. Let's go ahead and just get surgery done to that hamstring strain, and hopefully next season you come back. I mean, right now, Orlando City are saying he doesn't need the surgery, but you look in soccer, I mean, so many players get hamstring injuries and players are out for months. So again, like I was saying about Josef Martinez, you just don't want to see players out, because you want to see teams at their full strength by the time that the Union take them on. And, when the Union win, you don't want there to be excuses. You want the Union to win games when teams are at their 100%. Moving on, though, to news point number 3. Manuel Veth from transfermarket.com is reporting that sources have told him that Axel Witsel is interested in joining MLS after his contract with Dortmund ends this summer. LA Galaxy and LAFC are the likely destinations. And so at first I thought, maybe this could be a DP signing. But the more I look at it, I think it will probably be a TAM signing, in my opinion. And I think Witsel would be an interesting signing to join MLS, where I don't know how many of you guys pay attention to the Bundesliga, how many of you guys pay attention to Dortmund, but Axel Witsel is a Belgian international where he has 120 caps, 11 goals. He's a defensive midfielder, and for Dortmund this season, he's appeared in 25 games in the Bundesliga, 1 goal. 62% of those times he was in the starting 11. So it's not like he's not playing consistently. And I think this is a player who could offer both of those teams a lot of key experience. I think he would be a good signing for the league I wouldn't say he's a superstar by no means, but I think he's known, right? I mean, he's got to be known for his big poofy hair. At least I feel like that's what he should be known for if people don't really know who he is. There's 2 Belgians that people know in the midfield that have big poofy hair. It's Fellaini and Witsel. And so I think both of those teams could use a good defensive midfielder. And just looking at it in his 141 appearances in all competitions for Dortmund, he has 12 goals and 6 assists. Again, I mean, none of those stats really impress me because he's a defensive midfielder. It's not his job to score goals or get assists. And again, I wouldn't mind seeing the signing just because he's played so many times for Belgium. He's been a part of so many successful Belgium teams. And I don't know, who's to say that, Axel Witsel doesn't come over and enjoy his time here in MLS, and maybe he tells Kevin De Bruyne to come to MLS when he's done at City. Maybe he tells Eden Hazard to come to MLS when he's done in Europe. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys would be interested to see these former European superstars in MLS. I mean, the league's definitely one away from getting these big superstars, but I definitely wouldn't mind seeing an Eden Hazard or Kevin De Bruyne when they're done playing in Europe. And Axel Witsel, I think that would be a great signing for MLS as a whole. And I still think if he does come, I think he has a lot to give. So that's definitely a move to keep your eye out on. And the final news bit I want to talk about is Jack Elliott and Andre Blake earned Team of the Week honors for Week 6. Well deserved. Jack Elliott gets into the starting 11 while Andre Blake gets his way on the bench. And it's about time Jack Elliott gets recognition. I think you could have put the whole back line back there this week for the Union for what they did against Columbus. But nonetheless, Jack Elliott finally getting recognition from MLS. And it bothers me, I'm not going to lie, that somehow Scotland still hasn't called Jack Elliott up to the national team. I think he could do a hell of a job for the national team. I think Jacob Glesnes could do a great job for the Norwegian national team. I don't know if there's the stigma with their coaches where, they play in MLS, so I'm not going to call you guys up. I mean, that shouldn't really be the case with Scotland, right? Because Johnny Russell still gets called up for the national team, and he plays for Sporting KC. So, I don't know. I think both of those guys deserve to get called up to the national team. They definitely don't get the recognition that they deserve from MLS as a whole. But, Week 6, they decided to put Jack Elliott in the starting 11. But let's go ahead and talk about Philadelphia Union versus Columbus Crew. So, as we all know, that game ended 1-0 to the Union. And that game, in my opinion, might have been one of the best defensive displays by the Union ever. At least ever since I started watching the Union, that's definitely in my top 5 best defensive moments. A lot of you guys that have paid attention to the Union since the beginning, maybe you guys could tell me, that was one of the best defensive displays you've ever seen. And there was a talk on Twitter months ago, and I'm sure we've talked about it before in this podcast, where, there's a lot of best moments, a lot of recency bias of best moments because, we're in the golden age of Philadelphia Union soccer. And so it's easy for me to say, that was one of the best defensive displays ever just because we're in this golden generation. And I would definitely love to hear from you guys on Twitter what you guys think about that. People that have followed this team from the beginning since 2012, 2013. Do you guys think that defensive display was one of the best you guys have ever seen by the Union? I mean, the Union played so well defensively, forcing Columbus to rush multiple shots. And when they did have good opportunities, Andre Blake stepped up big time. And whenever a Union player got beat on the dribble, you would see another player there to cover for them. And these players really work their tails off. Not a single one of these players care about doing the dirty work. They're fine with doing the dirty work. And sometimes, that's what it takes to win games. And do I think Columbus were unlucky not to get a point? Yeah, I do. It's unfortunate that they gave up an own goal by Eloy Room. One where I think you should have punched the ball instead of catching it. And I do give Columbus a lot of credit for the way that they approached this game with the interchanging of Yeboah and Derek Etienne. I thought both of those guys caused a lot of issues for the Union defensively. Both of those players did a good job. And just to go at Nate and Kai in 1v1 situations with their pace. And, those guys did a good job to just really to absorb the pressure. And like I said, when an outside back got beat by the dribble, there was another player there to cover to make sure that Columbus didn't go much farther than what they did to beat that player in a 1v1 situation. And look, this is a game we all know the Union played a lot of this game in their half. And I know it's not what we're used to seeing the Union play a low block where Mikael Ua and Julian Carranza are coming so deep to help out defensively. And I'm sure part of that was probably because the Union got such an early goal in this game where they're like, okay, well, we'll sit back a little bit deeper and hit you guys on the counterattack and try to get multiple goals. Because, look, the Union could have had 2-3 goals in this game, not just one. And a couple missed time passes, a couple saves that Eloy Room made really great saves on. And he really stepped up from that early blunder in this game to keep Columbus in this game. And that's why I say Columbus were unlucky not to get a point in this game. I think that they did deserve a point. But, the Union did enough to cause havoc in the 6-yard box where Eloy Room dropped the ball, and the Union were comfortable, sitting a little bit deeper and making Lucas Zelarayan frustrated in this game, just taking away angles for him to split the defenders, forcing him to take shots that he normally wouldn't want to rush those shots. And yeah, the Union just did a really good job defensively, I thought. And, I have no problem seeing the Union play that deep because, they got the early goal and we wanted 3 points. And yeah, we all want to see the front three scoring a ton of goals. And we could have had multiple goals in this game, like I said, but, I'll take it. Not every game we're going to see the Union get an early goal and then sit deep like that. It's not going to happen. Once the Union got that early goal, they forced Columbus to really come at them. And that's just how the Union are built. And I know I got a couple listener questions that talked about possession and the passing accuracy, and we'll talk about that again later on in this podcast. But just looking at it, the Union, they try to play the ball quickly in the transition, which I said, they mishit a lot of balls. The way I thought Columbus had their fullbacks join the attack, I thought it was quite clever as they would try and send overloads on each side. And the Union just did well to handle that pressure because, looking at the pressure stats, I think Football Reference only had 77 pressures in this game listed for Columbus, but even when Columbus weren't pressuring the Union, they were pushed so far forward, especially the two center halves. They were kind of pushed all the way to the midfield line where they were okay sending the two fullbacks into the attacking zone, which meant that the Union had to drop back, cover these guys. And yeah, it was really, really interesting to see how Union approached this game defensively and how Columbus approached the game offensively. And Columbus were, they were confident with Josef Mensa and Deganik. If the Union were able to transition quickly in a 1v1, they were confident with these guys' 1v1ing ability where they didn't think they would get beat. And I thought Columbus probably couldn't have come up with a better game plan. They were just unlucky, and we'll take the 3 points however we get it. And you wonder why Columbus is up there in XG, and you saw it. They created a lot of chances. And Agby, I thought, was excellent. And Zelarayan, his passing ability, we know how good it is. And even though the Union were able to frustrate him this game, time and time again, you see what he does against teams in MLS. And you can be disappointed as a Union fan that they didn't score more than one goal in this game. Like I said in the intro, Gazdag had multiple chances. Unlucky not to get a goal this game. Mikhail Ua had a couple chances, and Eloy Room just came up big with multiple key saves, like I said. And there's just not much more for me to say about this game. Just super proud of how the Union played defensively. Columbus, again, I'll say it again, just very unlucky to have scored that own goal and not come away with a point. But a win's a win, and we'll take it as Union fans. And I didn't want to play what Jim Curtin had to say about just each player stepping up defensively, putting their bodies on the line for each other.
When you see a guy put his body on the line and the bumps and bruises and throw themselves in front of point-blank shots, it makes you want to help too. They really do not want to let each other down. They don't want to be the guy that's responsible for conceding when you have a streak like this going. Look, I think it starts in training too. They take real pride in protecting that red zone that we call, which extends from the 6-yard box up to the top of the D. I've talked about it with you guys, but they put their bodies on the line in those areas. We had a couple fouls outside of that red zone where you get a little nervous with Zelarayan when he's standing over the ball. But overall, we did a good job defending tonight, and the players deserve all the credit for this good start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what you love to see. You love seeing players put their bodies on the line. Seeing Julian Kranza and Mikhail Ua coming back and helping out defensively. And yeah, you don't want your strikers coming back because you know they're strikers, but seeing these two guys, and it's not just them, Corey Burke, Sergio Santos, they don't have any problem coming back, tracking, helping win the ball back. And to see that this is such a selfless team, it's you love to see it, and it's the exact players. You see the players that Jim Curtin and Ernst Tanner like to sign. It's players that, number one, are going to work off the ball, do the work defensively. And two, they look to sign players that don't have egos, that are going to fit into the culture that they've already established in that locker room. And there's no player on this team that I think's a selfish player. The selfish players that are on this team, they're not here anymore. And this is a really exciting team to watch. And yeah, I'm just really, really grateful that we have guys that fight for the badge every single game and fight for each other. That's what you want in players. But let's go ahead and review my 3 keys to the game. I said number 1, don't give away dangerous free kicks / opportunities to shoot outside the box for Lucas Zelarayan. For me, you guys heard the clip. Jim said, we gave a couple chances away outside the box. And for me, I think it's a little bit of a pass / fail. They give up 2 free kicks in a dangerous area to Columbus. 1 indirect free kick that saw Zelarayan missed just wide, the play that Andre Blake got hurt. And then there was a play where Zelarayan, I thought, potentially was going to shoot it, but he decided to cross the ball in, and it wasn't attacked dangerously at all. But the Union did enough to get a clean sheet in this game. And so because of that, I say it's a little bit of a pass, also a little bit of a fail, because they gave away free kicks in places where you don't really want to give away free kicks to Columbus. Number 2, I said you got to contain Derek Etienne. And when I had Jordan Angelion, I meant to mention Yao Yaraboa as well. I forgot to mention his name in there. But yeah, I said contain those 2 players. For me, I think that's 100% a pass. Despite them being 5 for 7 in 1v1 dribbles, they were 1 for 11 on crosses, and the Union caught Derek Etienne offsides 3 times. So, look, no goals, no assists for either one of those guys, even though they had a couple assists, even though they were able to beat the outside backs, Jack Elliott, in 1v1 situations. The Union didn't allow them to score a goal. So, yeah, it's a pass in my opinion. And then number 3, I said handling the pressure in the midfield. And for me, that's a pass too. Only 3 attempted tackles in the midfield by Columbus, mostly because this game was played in the Union's half. Like I mentioned earlier, on Football Reference, it has it listed as 77 pressures for Columbus. And, I think a lot of that's due just because the Union had to play most of this game in the half, and Columbus really didn't have to pressure the Union. They took away the passing angles. The Union, as soon as they won the ball back, they would try to play a long ball over the top or one ball to the outside, and then they would play that long ball to a striker. And yeah, you didn't see a lot of 1v1 passing, building out the attack for the Unions. As soon as they win the ball back, let's send a long ball forward. And because of that, Columbus really didn't have to pressure the Union. So those are my 3 keys to the game. And that's my thoughts on how I thought the Union did. And then the 3-star players, number 1, Jack Elliott. I'm just going to read off stats to you guys. He's the star player of the game. You guys heard early in the episode talking about him winning Team of the Week honors. What more can I say about this guy? 10 clearances, 4 headed clearances. And I know people don't really like clearance stats, but I think these 10 clearances are important to bring up because of all the pressure that the Union had to absorb in this game. Jack Elliott was just cleaning out the danger and having the defense, the midfielders reset. So I think you can bring up the 10 clearances in this game because of that. He had 1 interception, 6 ball recoveries, 3 out of 6 aerial duels won, and he won 5 out of 8 of his ground duels. Number 2 star player of the night for me was Kai Wagner. 2 key passes. He was 1 for 3 in his tackles. 1 block, 3 clearances, 2 of which were headed, 2 interceptions, 7 recoveries. His ground duels were 4 out of 8, and his aerial duels 2 for 2. And then number 3, Andre Blake, 4 saves. His distribution was good, especially he was able to find Nate Harrell pushed up the field a little bit, and he was able to find Nate. Nate was able to carry the ball into the attacking half, and I believe a shot eventually came from that moment. I'd have to go back and look. But, yeah, I mean, when Andre was called upon, he came up with 4 big key saves and helped the Union keep a clean sheet in this game, get all 3 points. So, not much more to say about this Columbus game, not much more to say about the players. And then blunder of the week, I mean, of course it's going to go to Eloy Room, but can I just give the blunder of the week to just goalkeeping in MLS last weekend in general? I mean, Brad Guzan had a blunder. Brad Knighton had a blunder for New England. Carlos Cornell had a blunder for New York Red Bulls, even though I think that was more the defender not communicating with Carlos. But, yeah, we saw 4 goalkeepers last weekend have blunders and cost their team points. So, yeah, I think just in general, I think MLS goalkeeping needs to get blunder of the week. But yeah, let's go ahead, guys, and let's talk about the Toronto game. So coming into this game, Toronto is 2-2-2 currently, and they're currently on a unbeaten run of 3 games. And this will be Toronto's 4th home match of the season where they are 2-1 and have been outscored by opponents 6-5. But that number is a little bit skewed because they gave up 4 goals against the New York Red Bulls where Lewis Morgan scored a hat trick. And, just like Julian Carranza a little bit, he's had a completely different time with the Red Bulls than he did when he was down into Miami. And it's just funny to watch these 2 former players who you could tell had potential not really do much down in Miami. That just tells you how bad the system is down in Miami. And I know both Julian and Lewis Morgan were brought in prior to Phil Neville and Henderson taking over down there in Miami, but still, I mean, it's not like they were bad players. It's just a system down in Miami is just so terrible. I know a big reason why New York Red Bulls were able to get Lewis Morgan from Inter Miami is because you guys all know how they got fined a whole bunch of GAM because of the whole Matuidi situation where they had too many DPs on the roster. So they were just trying to get back any money that they could and then bring in new players under Chris Henderson and Phil Neville. And so that's kind of why we saw Lewis Morgan get sold to the New York Red Bulls. And then it's part of the reason why Julian Carranza, to get his contract off the book down there in Miami, was able to come to the Union. But yeah, like I said, I mean, being outscored by their opponents 6-5, that number is definitely skewed because of the 4 goals they gave up against the Red Bulls. And as we know, the Union are undefeated on the season, and they're looking to make it 6 wins in a row. But not only that, the Union are also looking to go over 500 all times in terms of MLS regular season wins and losses. The Union are currently 147 wins, 147 losses all time. And I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the dark days so well early in the years where it would be loss after loss. And maybe you guys figured that you'd never see the Union go above 500. But Jim Curtin talks about it all the time, how ever since 2019, the Union have taken the most points out of all teams in MLS. And, it is no coincidence that things started to turn around when Ernst Tenner officially had a full season under his belt in 2019. I know he took over towards the end of the 2018 season, but to really put his foot down and make a name for himself with the Union, it really started to happen in 2019. And, Jim had to go through periods where they weren't buying the right players, and a lot of the success today is due to the academy. We all know that. And, they weren't really investing heavily in the academy back then, or maybe I should say producing players like they are through the academy. I think that's a better way to say it. They were definitely investing in the academy, but it's taken a while to get players finally coming out of the system. And now it seems like year after year, we're always signing a couple players to homegrown contracts. And after a couple years, we kind of expect them to be sold to teams in Europe. But, Jim Curtin was asked today in his press conference, what are your thoughts on potentially setting history, a huge milestone for the club Saturday against Toronto? And I'm just going to say, even if the Union don't win against Toronto, they're definitely going to go over 500 at some point this season. Look, we're still undefeated at home, and I think if you guys remember my predictions, I said the Union were going to go undefeated at home. I didn't think they'd be on this crazy run that they're on right now. But anyway, this is what Jim Curtin had to say about potentially going over 500 on Saturday.
Yeah, look, every time we step on the field, we want to win. I think that when you think back to the start of the club and maybe some growing pains in the early stages, I think a lot of credit has to go to Jay Sugarman and his vision to build a club and to do it in a unique way and to stick with a plan. And while that took some time to get to this point, I think now you're seeing us executing on the field. You're seeing us doing a great job with our young players and our academy developing young kids. Union 2 doing a great job developing young players when the moment's right, selling them. But make no mistake, Jay Sugarman wants to win, and ultimately winning is the most important thing. So we've been able to do that in recent years. I think we have a product on the field that other clubs ask about now and talk about, which is flattering. But we also know that the hardest thing to do is to stay towards the top. That's something that we'll continue to do. But I think, at a time when a lot of teams decided to just maybe buy individual big names, Jay had a vision along with Richie Graham and then obviously Mr. Levovic coming on board where we were going to do it in a different way. We were going to really trust our youth. And now you're starting to see that plan come to fruition and the results have followed. So I think he deserves the credit for that. And this weekend is an opportunity, like you said, to get us in that positive win percentage, which is always important.
And, the first thing I always say to people, if they don't really follow MLS, if they don't follow the Union, is people, I feel like, that pay attention to soccer, but maybe not so much MLS, or like I said, if they don't pay attention at all, they're used to MLS signing these old retired players that are just looking to collect a paycheck here in MLS. And I always point to what the Union are doing with their academy, where since Ernst Tenner's got here, he's went to the lower divisions in Europe and bringing players that, would probably not get a chance at the top divisions in Europe if they stayed in the lower division. So they took a risk to leave their home countries, a lot of them, to come to America. And if they play well in MLS, then they're going to get called up by multiple teams in Europe. with the bigger division saying, oh, well, you left your home country and you guys are playing in a competitive league. Yeah, we know MLS isn't as competitive as the Bundesliga, as the Premier League and everything, but yeah, it's definitely a lot different. I say it all the time, right? It's a lot different than when I watched in 2007 when David Beckham was here comparing to where it is now. And MLS is just going to continue to grow, and we've seen teams throughout MLS, I feel like a lot more recently, that have seen the union have success with signing academy players, investing into the academy, scouting players in these lower leagues. And you're seeing a whole bunch of teams go and sign players in the second divisions, the third divisions. And you look at LA Galaxy, yeah, they have Chicharito on the team, but they have multiple guys on that team where they've started to hit second divisions in Europe. And, there's a reason why the Galaxy are as high up the table in the West as they are, because they're not bringing in just a Zlatan Ibrahimovic or a Robbie Keane, a Steven Gerrard. No, they're going out and signing players that the Union are targeting. And not saying that the players on LA Galaxy are players that the Union were looking at, but they're looking at these leagues that the Union are definitely looking at. And like Jim said, they have teams calling up and saying, yeah, we want to base our club off of what you guys have done, because, when you had the most points in MLS since 2019, of course, teams are going to want to try to emulate you. And Jim said it himself, it's flattering that teams look at the Union that way. And so, like I said, I mean, if the Union don't go above 500 this Saturday, then they'll definitely get it at some point this season. And yeah, it's nothing to stress about if they don't get it, but just know that there's definitely a big milestone that the Union could hit for the first time ever this Saturday if they get a win against Toronto. And then if you go ahead and look at the stats, Jesus Jimenez for Toronto, he's the leading goal scorer with 3 goals and 6 appearances. He's one of the new guys that they signed this season who was playing his soccer in Poland previously. He's a Spanish forward. He's 28 years old, I believe. They've signed a couple of new players. They've had a lot of guys come up from their academy. And Bob Bradley's a guy who is also new to Toronto this season. And we saw what he did at LAFC. And we're starting to see early signs now here with Toronto. Like I said, 3 games unbeaten. And I don't know if it was a podcast or if it was an interview. One of the two I was listening to, where they were talking about how Bob Bradley isn't afraid to give young players an opportunity to shine. He's not afraid to call upon them when, they're deserving of minutes. And we've seen that already with Toronto, and a lot of those guys are impressing with Toronto. And, for those young guys, that's all they need is a coach to say, I don't care what your age is and everything. If you're good enough, you're going to play. And yeah, that's what it's been the last couple weeks for Toronto. And like I said, just 3 games unbeaten. A lot of that's due to the youth that Toronto have been playing. But just going back to Jesus Jimenez, when you look at it, you think, oh, Alejandro Pozuelo is going to be their main man. And, through 6 games, he has 1 goal, 1 assist. So in the stats department right there, where a lot of casual fans look at, he's not really lighting the world up. But, that's not to discredit him and say that he's disappointing by no means, because, he's the type of player that just needs 1 chance and he'll make you pay. And, I mean, look, he's leading the team in key passes with 10. He's second on the team with key passes in the final third with 24. So, yeah, of course, he's a player that the Union will have to be aware of, and the Union are always aware of him. Like I said, he just needs 1 moment to either get a shot off or play a killer pass, and he give the lead to Toronto or tie a game up. I mean, he's that good of a player, even though, he doesn't have as much assists as he would probably hope, or goals too. But, I think for Toronto, it's good for them to not rely on 1 player. And, all the focus is going to be on Lorenzo Insigne when he comes here in the summertime. But to see somebody like Jesus Jimenez, first year in MLS, already off to a flying start with 3 goals and 6 appearances, that will help, I think, take the weight off of Insigne's shoulders once he comes here in the summertime. But, I asked Jim Curtin at the press conference, I said, Jesus is new to the league, and, you don't have much data, you don't have much video to go off of the player. How do you prepare for a player like that? And this is what Jim had to say to my question.
Yeah, look, we were aware of the player before he played for Toronto FC as well. So again, what comes to mind is his movement in the box, the intelligence that he plays with, the runs that he makes. Again, he's not maybe the fastest player. He's not going to look to run in behind, 25 times a game, but his ability to combine, hold the ball up and move in the box is something that you don't need a lot of video or tape of him to recognize. He's gotten on the end of some plays and finished them off. So he's very dangerous in what we call the red zone. So we'll have to do a good job on him. When you have players like Michael Bradley and Pozuelo getting you the ball, Osorio as well, great players. That are really dangerous. So we'll have our hands full for sure. We want to try the best we can to limit the amount of time Pozuelo is on the ball, try to force Michael to play square and backwards as best we can. But at the same time, great players are going to hurt you for certain moments during the game. So that's takes a real team effort. It's not any one guy's job. It's not, just Jose Martinez's job. It's not just the Leon Flock's job. It's a collective effort trying to get everybody on the same page to limit a really talented team.
So I don't know. Look, the first 5 seconds, Jim Curtin says, yeah, we were aware of Jimenez before he got to Toronto. So to me, that says that, okay, were the Philadelphia Union potentially scouting Jimenez? Could Jimenez have potentially been a Union signing if they wouldn't have got Mikel Uhre? I probably should have had a follow-up question there and said, oh, are you saying that you guys were scouting him before he wound up going to Toronto? But I didn't follow up because I know if I would have asked that question, Jim Curtin would have gave the typical PR answer and said, oh, I'm not going to talk about other teams' players. So there's really no point, in my opinion, asking that question when I already knew the answer I would have got. But I did think it was interesting that Jim let it off, saying that, yeah, we were already aware of the player. And just my opinion, I really think that Jim Curtin and Ernst Tenner were already scouting the player when he was playing in Poland. And yeah, Jim's right. Not the fastest player in the world, right? He's a player that holds up the ball, so Jack Elliott and Jacob Glesnes are going to have to be strong. And they've been rock solid all season long. And this might be their toughest test up front. I know Tati Castellanos is the leading goal scorer from last season. He's a terrific striker, but he's different than what Jimenez brings. And he scored some good goals already for Toronto this season. Like I said, 3 goals. And I think that's going to be a great matchup for Union fans to pay attention to watch how Jack Elliott, Jacob Glesnes handle him. Which one of those players is going to be primarily on him? I don't think it's going to be just one or the other. I think they'll both be aware of the space that Jimenez is in, and they'll both have their zones where they know where they have to cover. So you won't really see shifting off between Jacob Glesnes and Jack Elliott when it comes to watching Jimenez. But, you go ahead and look at the series between these two teams. Toronto leads with 12 wins, 9 losses, and 7 draws. In 15 matches away to Toronto, the Union are 3-4-8. Last year's result in Toronto saw these two teams tie 2-2, with Union scoring in the first minute with Ali Bedoya, which, remember, was not the fastest goal in Union history. I know, just looking on Twitter, people are like, oh, it's the fastest goal in Union history. And remember, that came in 2015 versus DC United, courtesy of CJ Sapong, who scored in 20 seconds. So, no, Ali Bedoya scored in less than a minute, but did not come close to CJ Sapong scoring in the first 20 seconds of the game. And the Union would actually wind up trailing in this game 2-1 until Sergio Santos was able to rescue a point. And the Union's last win in Toronto came in 2019, courtesy of a Jamiro Montero winner. And you go ahead and look at stats, and I know stats aren't for everybody, but when I was previewing for how I wanted to prepare the second half of the show, how I wanted to base my questions to Jim Curtin, the one thing I knew was that Sergio Santos had scored a hat trick against Toronto at home. He scored a goal to tie this game, the last game of the season that these two teams played last season. But I totally forgot that he had 6 goals in 6 appearances until I looked it up. And so, yeah, I asked Jim. I said, Sergio Santos is really, really hot when it comes to playing against Toronto. Does what he's done in the past play into your decision on whether or not you want to start him? And this is what Jim had to say.
Yeah, we talked about that exact point. So a good pickup from you. He does score goals against Toronto, and sometimes there's something to those things, and sometimes it can be random. I'd say Corey Burke also comes to mind. When we play Chicago, he for some reason has a ton of goals in his career. So sometimes it's matchup. Sometimes there's not a lot to it. When I think of Chicago and Toronto, the personnel changes a lot. So again, when you score goals against certain teams, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but your point is a fair one. He's done well in Toronto. He's done well at home against Toronto, and is certainly a guy whose skill set and his speed and power can really stretch a defense and change a defense. So he will be available. He's back off of injury, trained full so far this week, and looks sharp in training. So whether it's off the bench or as a starter, a real weapon, and like you said, has had success against Toronto.
Yeah, it's great news right there that Jim said that Sergio Santos is good. He's been training fully. Andre Blake, I know he wasn't asked about that in the press conference, but Andre Blake's been training fully with the Union as well. So, no need to worry about both of those guys not being available against Toronto. But Jim's right. I mean, the speed, the physicality that Sergio Santos brings, and I think that's something we probably missed against Columbus last week, where I know we talked about in the first half how Columbus kind of had the Union pinned down, and as soon as the Union would win the ball back, they would try to transition fast and hit a long ball over the top and have Mikael or Julian run into the channels to get the ball. But the Union really didn't have too many opportunities to do that. But a player like Sergio Santos, who, for my money, is the fastest player on this team, and I know Stuart Finley always has something to say about that whenever the Union posts videos saying he's faster than Sergio Santos. But I do think that we missed Sergio's speed against Columbus. Maybe could have helped us stretch those lines a little bit more, but I would love to see Sergio Santos get the start. I mean, looking at the stats, 6 goals and 6 appearances, how do you not start Sergio Santos? He's only started in 3 of these matches, so there is a chance that Sergio doesn't start against Toronto. But I don't know. It was nice to hear Jim say, that's something that we've been talking about this week, and I just hope that they start Sergio Santos, because I think if you do start Sergio Santos, I think he'll get you a goal. And it will be interesting to see what striker partnership combines the best. We've already seen Julian Kranza and Mikael Uhre last week. We've seen Sergio Santos, Corey Burke in the past. We've seen Julian Kranza and Corey Burke. We've seen Julian Kranza and Sergio Santos. And we've yet to see Corey Burke and Mikael Uhre, and we've yet to see. Actually, no, I lied. Yeah, you saw Corey Burke and Mikael Uhre for a little bit last week, right, against Columbus. We've not seen Sergio Santos and Mikael Uhre, so I think there's a strong chance that we do see that combination against Toronto. And the numbers don't lie. If you play Sergio Santos against Toronto, odds are he's going to score a goal. So yeah, hopefully Santos does get the start, and hopefully he does get a goal. But let's go ahead and look at my 3 keys to a victory for the Union before we get into some listener questions. So try to wrap this up fast for you guys. Number 1, I said pressure, pressure, pressure. Toronto is a team that loves to build their attack. They're used to having time on the ball with Michael Bradley and Osorio in the midfield. They're just really play these short passes. They play these side-to-side passes, and then once one of their outside backs make a run into the channel, that's when they hit the long ball over the top. So, I think if the Union, you guys heard Jim Curtin say it, if they can force Michael Bradley to go backwards, side to side, then that means that they're doing the job. So that's number 1, pressure, pressure, pressure. Number 2, get bodies into the 18 often. Toronto, they've given up the third highest total of completed passes in the 18-yard box with 63, while 22% of those passes have come from crosses. So I know what I'm going to say for point 3 maybe contradicts point 2 a little bit, but yeah, I think that's an area where Mikael Uhr's a bigger body, where he said, he's good in the air. He doesn't mind running in from behind. Yeah, let's get the ball to Mikael's feet. Let's see what he can do in the hold-up play. We know what Sergio Santos can do with hold-up play. We saw it come against Montreal when the Union scored a goal courtesy of Ali Bedoya because of the hold-up play from Sergio Santos. So yeah, get bodies into the 18-yard box often. And then point number 3, take on the wingbacks on the 1v1 dribbles. Like I said, a lot of inexperience from their fullbacks, a lot of homegrown players. They've used multiple different pairings, and because of that, I want to see both of them tested. Let's have Ali Bedoya and Nate Harriel combine and attack them. Let's see Kai Wagner and Leon Flock and Sergio Santos and go at their fullbacks. Mikael Uhr and go at their fullbacks. Because when you're taking these guys on in 1v1 situations, then you have your chance to cross the ball into the box. And maybe not so much Mikael Uhr going out on a 1v1 dribble. Let's keep him into the box. But yeah, definitely take advantage of your fullbacks and allow them to take on these inexperienced players and see if anything can come of it. But those are my 3 keys to the game for the Union that I'm paying attention to this weekend. And let's get to listener questions. So the first question comes from Renee Turner. He says, is Sullivan going to score in Toronto this weekend? He's been on a serious tear recently. He's looked good, and he scored multiple goals this season with the U20s. Fans want to see him playing a lot more than he has for the Union. He's been getting game time with U2 to just keep him fresh. I mean, look, I don't know how many of you guys watched the game against Columbus for U2, but he looked promising playing as a striker. He looked good as a striker against Columbus's first team when he came on off the bench. He had a chance to score a goal. And I'm with you guys. I want to see Quinn Sullivan playing a lot more than what he's played. And you see when the Union need legs defensively and offensively, he brings a spark and energy that's lacking out there on the field. And I don't think Quinn's going to start this game against Toronto because Ali Bedoya's stats are pretty good as well against Toronto. But if the Union are down a goal or if they want to see off a lead and then they have a chance to hit Toronto on the counterattack, yeah, I could definitely see Quinn Sullivan scoring. But yeah, if I was a betting man, I don't think I would bet for Quinn Sullivan to score, but I'll say there's a chance, right? The second question comes from Greg Jenkins. He says, any concern with low passing accuracy? I understand our play is predicted on hectic defense to force turnovers, but it seems like a lot of missed connections on offense. This is crazy to me because I've seen so many people throughout different social media apps complaining about, the Union's passing's not been great. They're hardly possessing the ball. And it's like, people don't realize how the Union play. They've never been a team that wants to hold the ball. You want to beat the Union, you make them hold on to the ball. You make them build out their plays to try to beat you. And the Union don't really have success doing that. It's the same way how you beat the New York Red Bulls. You want to beat the Red Bulls, you let them hold on to the ball. So that's why I feel like you see such low-scoring games between those two teams because neither one of the teams want to have the ball. They want to hit you on the counterattack. But earlier in the season, I was concerned. I was talking to some Union fans about our passing stats, comparing them to years prior. And, in the past, I was critical of Leon Flock's passing ability. And, it's a little bit concerning still, but every player's passing stats are down this season. Players that have attempted 40 or more passes, Jose Martinez is the leader amongst them with 76.5% completed. And, the Union are just trying to transition the ball fast. Win the ball back on defense, play a long ball into the channels for the strikers to chase, 1 or 2 passes, and then a cross into the 18 or a shot from outside the 18. That's how the Union have been attacking teams this season. We've scored multiple goals that way. the Union aren't taking time to build out their attack. And like I said, you want to beat the Union, you got to force the Union to build out their attack, which not many teams have done that yet. So I'm not concerned with it as some fans are. It's mind-boggling to me that so many fans are talking about it on social media like, oh, this is such a big problem. Like, the Union on a 5-game winning streak, they haven't lost a game all season, and yet people always find something to complain about. Like, ever since Ernst Tanner's got here, the Union are a team that wants to hit you on that counterattack. They don't want to hold on to the ball, and now people want to complain about it. I don't really know why people are complaining about it now, but I guess people gotta complain about something. The next question comes from Sully, and he says, given what we've seen out of our forward pairings, do you think any gel more naturally or combine better than any others? And could it be somewhat of a whoever's hot approach to selecting the pairing? In my opinion, Sergio Santos and Julian Carranza, I think those two guys gel the best, in my opinion, because they've had the most time together. We saw the first game of the season, preseason game, against Cincinnati. Julian and Sergio Santos and Kai Wagner, all three of these guys linked up to score a goal. We've seen Sergio Santos and Julian Carranza link up in the regular season and score a goal. We saw Kai and Julian Carranza link up and score a goal via Daniel Gazdag against Montreal. So I do think Sergio and Julian, because they've had the most time together, that they understand each other's runs. They combined for the goal against Charlotte, like I said. As for the approach, Jim answered this a couple weeks ago, and he said they'll select their pairing on different matchups. So, yeah, it might be nice to have two strikers in form, but, if the matchup calls for a Julian Carranza, Sergio Santos formation, a Corey Burke, Mikael Uhre pairing, then that's what they go with. So I'll just stick with what Jim Curtin said, and we'll see whatever the matchups call for the best pairing. And then the last question comes from Kyle Almany. He says, Todd, who surprised you the most of this season? And then again, he asked, do you give credence to us being in the bottom of the league in possession and passing? I kind of answered that already in the first question. Again, so many people want to know just about possession and the passing ability by the Union. But for the player that surprised me the most this season, it has been Nate Harriel, 100%. I mean, what Union fan wouldn't tell you that, in my opinion, to take a starting spot away from Olivier Baizo, who is constantly called up to the Cameroonian national team, who's going to the World Cup, who beat multiple teams to get there in World Cup qualifyings. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any other acceptable answer other than Nate Harriel. I guess some people can say Daniel Gazdag, but yeah, I mean, if you guys listen to my prediction episode at the beginning of the year, I predicted Daniel Gazdag to do what he's doing now, so that's not really a surprising player for me. It's got to be Nate Harriel, but yeah, hopefully that answers all you guys' questions. Appreciate doing that. That was the first time this season that I've taken listener questions, and speaking of first times this season, next Thursday I'm going to be going live on Twitter Spaces to talk about the Montreal and Philadelphia Union game. And I've done Twitter Spaces in the past, and they've been a lot of fun. They're a lot better when people actually show up and want to participate. So, if that's something that you're interested in participating in next Thursday at 7 p.m., I'm going to be aiming for. Yeah, we'd love to have you ask questions, talk about what you've seen from the Union so far, maybe predictions going forward. And, like I said, just the more people that participate, the better those episodes are. And even if one person shows up, there's still a lot of fun just getting Union fans to interact with myself, talking to Union fans. So keep that one on your schedules if you guys want to participate. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow Free Kick Pod, where we get your podcast, The Free Kick. And, I've also not said this in a while, but I do appreciate people that leave reviews, leave critiques, say what they like about the podcast, what they don't like about the podcast. And for all these people that, give feedback, it's greatly appreciated. And even for the people that, don't give feedback, it's all good too, right? But if you guys are enjoying the podcast, like, seriously, don't be afraid to leave a review. I know I've said in the past, leave 5 stars. If you don't think this podcast is a 5 stars, then leave whatever you think it is. I think it's 5 stars, but I'm definitely biased. But not only leave a review, but if you have friends that are soccer fans, that are Union fans, you're trying to get them into the Union, why not recommend this podcast? Because we've seen double the amount of listeners from last season to this season, and we're already 6 games into the season, and to see the podcast grow as fast as it has the last couple seasons, it's been great. And I love getting feedback. I love interacting with people. So, if you have somebody, like I said, that wants to get into listening to podcasts, wants to get into the Union, why not tell them about this podcast? But, hopefully the Union complete a huge milestone this weekend in Toronto. We'll see what happens, right? I think a draw is probably in due, but if the Union can find a way to get a win, get all 3 points, look, you won't hear me complain. I'm sure the same with you guys too. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.